I'm reading from The Gun Rights War by Neal Knox. We're on section 3, page 155. This section is called On Totalitarianism, a July 4th essay, dated July 4th, 1996. Ask today's man on the street what the 4th of July means to him, and the odds are he'll say a 4-day weekend, beer and a barbecue in the park, or maybe tonight's fireworks show. Sadly, few will offer the correct answer, the celebration of our unique freedom. Freedom is the right and ability to make one's own choices, including the liberty to make the wrong choice and pay the price. Some would have us in a different kind of society under a Chairman Mao, or Ayatollah, or a Hitler, or a Stalin, who would make our decisions for us. That government could decide where we should work, how many daily calories we eat, how many square feet of living space we should be allocated, who we should marry, how many children we should bring into the world, who and how we should worship, and how many years we should be allowed to live. Such a system of government is called totalitarianism, for the total lives of the people are decided by a few in command. Between 1964 and 1966, I was a reporter for the Wichita Falls Times Record News. My beat included politics, and so I had gone to work on my interrupted college studies, studying political science. I studied totalitarian government under some who had experienced it. Under someone who had experienced it. He was a Korean political science professor, Dr. J.S. Moon, who escaped service in the occupying North Korean army by hiding in a hole under his mother's kitchen. He had a appreciation for freedom that most of us thankfully will never understand. Dr. Moon and I became friends. On many issues, he was a doctrine liberal, but despite the anti-Vietnam War fever that was beginning to sweep college campuses, he argued furiously for continuing that war, for the benefit of the people whose freedom depended upon being rescued from the totalitarianism that was communism. He once described their hope of freedom as a tiny flickering candle in a large, dark, drafty building. You cup your hands around it and try to protect it, for if it goes out, all is in darkness and all hope is gone. In one memorable class, far from his lesson plan and deep in an argument about the war, Dr. Moon told us about the long night he lost hope down in his hidey hole. North Korean soldiers were sweeping his neighborhood, searching homes for young men who had not volunteered to become part of the human wave infantry assaults. Any who were found would be shot. He prayed that they would not find him, that he would live through the night so he could volunteer for the Red Army the next morning. But a little before daylight, while he could hear boots on sidewalks and doors of nearby homes being smashed open, he heard the rumble of distant artillery. The Americans who'd been driven south were coming back. They were still fighting to save his freedom. And though he didn't turn himself in that morning. Dr. Moon thought that 6 elements were necessary to have a totalitarian government, as distinguished from a mere dictatorship. They include an ideology, capitalism oppresses the masses, Jews are vermin, etc., total control of the news media, and a total control of firearms. Surprisingly, Dr. Moon was an advocate of the gun laws then being pushed by President Lyndon Johnson and Senator Thomas Dodd. He was until I pointed out that those laws contradicted his own teachings and experiences and what happened to him in Korea. What happened to Anne Frank's family in Europe and has happened in many other countries before and since couldn't have happened if the people were armed. The Founding Fathers saw to it that we were armed. They saw what had happened to their rights in Boston when the British took their arms. So they stood and fought at Lexington and Concord when the redcoats tried to take those guns, and when they called out the militia when King George's men tried to take their powder at Williamsburg. Such intolerable acts were why they declared their independence and why they guaranteed that we would be armed. The insurance policy which protects freedom is that freedom which we celebrate today. All right, the last part of section 3 is called On Arming the Somali Mothers. It starts on page 157. It's dated July 2nd, 1997, and there's an editor's note from his son. Some accused Neal Knox of extremism, saying that he advocated positions and ideas that were so far out of the mainstream as to be ridiculous, if not downright dangerous. While hardly a moderate on this issue of Second Amendment liberties, his extreme viewpoints were typically straightforward ideas and principles brought to a logical conclusion. Thus, never before published piece was originally an email to member of the NRA board who was concerned that first Vice President Knox's extreme views had tainted the image of the association. One comment, a suggestion that was interpreted as a call to arm Somali mothers, showed up in a 1993 Wall Street Journal. 4 years later, that comment had resurfaced during a run-up to the board election that replaced Knox with Charleston Heston in the succession to the presidency of the NRA. It starts, I don't consider my comment to the Wall Street Journal about arming Somali mothers to be a gaffe, though they tried to make a big deal of it, including putting it on a front page lead and headline of the profile they ran on me in 1993. The writer Eric Larson, whom I had avoided for 2 months because his last piece had been a nasty article entitled The Gun in the Atlantic Monthly, pulled my comments out of context. But I've been treated much more unfairly. The Larson Wall Street Journal piece wasn't nearly as bad as I expected. In fact, a high-priced Washington public relations guy wanted to know how much I had to pay Larson for what he thought was a positive piece. If you recall, when that journal piece was done, the U.S. had just sent troops to Somalia and announced purpose of disarming the warring factions. The wild eyes on the internet were buzzing that the only reason for going over there was to train the U.S. soldiers on how to disarm civilians and eventually put that training to use against U.S. citizens. So when Larson asked if I thought the soldiers and Marines were there to disarm the Somali people, a question he didn't publish, it was very much a loaded question, and I knew it. I responded that the Somali people weren't armed, that only the ones who were armed were the bandit warlords like General Adid, that if the people were armed, they wouldn't have to put up with the widely reported thievery, rapings, killings, and general brutality. He wanted to know my solution. I told him that if the U.S. troops gave those AKs they were seizing from the warlords to the mothers, they would soon put a stop to the thugs taking food from the mouths of their starving babies. Some think it was a gaffe. I think it was a good answer. As evidence, it would have been a workable solution. Take a look at the May 1986 National Geographic, an extremist militia advocacy outfit, if there ever was one. In the middle of a story about Peru, there's a delightful photo of several Peruvian peasant ladies showing off their apparently U.S. 12-gauge pump shotguns and one seated lady with a bolt-action Mauser rifle in her lap. The caption says, their village had been attacked repeatedly and the school burned by guerrillas until the Peruvian army gave them guns, just like I suggested for the Somali mothers. The kidnapping ceased and the guerrillas hadn't been back since. That's the end of part 3 of The Gun Rights War by Neal Knox. Thank you for supporting our projects. If you'd like to buy us a cup of coffee, check out our Patreon channel.
The guys and gals at gunwebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice at least once a month, and carry every day. Thank you for watching gunwebsites.com.